The cold prairie wind howled through Redemption Creek as Zara Prentiss stumbled through the main street, clutching her 3-month-old son to her chest. Blood and tears mingled on her face, the result of her father's rage when he had discovered her secret, a child born out of wedlock. The father long gone to the California gold fields, promises of marriage scattered like dust. "Get out and never return," her father had roared, as the town watched from their doorways and windows, judgment in their eyes. In 1873, Wyoming Territory, an unmarried woman with a child, was considered little better than the painted ladies who worked in the saloons. Zara's arms ached from carrying little William and the small bundle of belongings she'd managed to grab. Night was falling, the temperature dropping rapidly as it always did in the high plains. She had nowhere to go, no money, and a hungry child who would soon need milk she wasn't sure she could provide. Her breasts felt empty, her own body starving after days of tension and little food. The lights of the Last Chance saloon glowed ahead, and Zara hesitated. She'd never set foot in such an establishment. Her father, the town's preacher, had made sure of that. But desperation drove her forward. Perhaps they needed someone to wash dishes, to clean, anything that might earn her enough to feed her child. As she approached the swinging doors, a commotion erupted inside. Shouting, the crash of breaking glass, and then a man came flying backward through the doors, landing hard in the dirt street. He wore dusty cowboy clothes, his hat tumbling away as he rolled to a stop. "And stay out, Tucker," bellowed a voice from inside. "Nobody cheats at cards in my establishment." The cowboy, Tucker, sat up slowly, touching a split lip. His eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, found Zara standing frozen a few feet away, her baby whimpering against her. "Madam," he said automatically, reaching for his hat and then noticing her battered face. His expression changed from embarrassment to concern. "Are you all right?" Zara couldn't speak. The events of the day crashed down upon her, and she swayed on her feet. William began to cry in earnest, his tiny wail cutting through the night air. Tucker Ironside was on his feet in an instant, steadying her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "Whoa there, steady." He looked at her more carefully, noting her torn dress, the bruising on her cheek, and the desperate clutch of her arms around the infant. "You need help." Zara finally found her voice, though it cracked with exhaustion. "I have nowhere to go. My father, the Reverend, he cast me out. Because of my son." The shame of it burned through her, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "I won't abandon my child." Tucker's jaw tightened as he looked toward the church at the end of the street, then back at the young woman before him. He couldn't have been more than 25, Zara guessed, though the lines around his eyes spoke of hard living. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Zara Prentiss, and this is William." Tucker nodded, then made a decision. "Miss Prentiss, I've got a room at the boarding house. Nothing fancy, but it's warm. You can have it tonight. I'll bunk in the stables." Zara stepped back, suspicion flaring. "Why would you help me?" Tucker smiled, revealing a dimple in his right cheek that softened his weathered face. "Because my ma raised me right, even if I do occasionally get accused of cheating at poker." He winked, then grew serious. "No strings, Miss Prentiss. You and your boy need shelter, and I can provide it tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure something else out." The baby's cries grew more insistent, and Zara felt her resolve crumbling. Thank you, but I can't pay you." Tucker picked up his hat, dusting it off against his thigh before settling it back on his dark hair. "Wasn't asking for payment." He nodded toward the boarding house down the street. "Come on, Mrs. Finch runs the place. She's a good sort, won't ask too many questions." Zara followed him, her legs nearly buckling with each step. The warmth of the boarding house enveloped her as they entered, and Mrs. Bipo Finch, a plump woman with kind eyes, took one look at Zara and her crying infant and immediately set about heating milk and preparing a room. "The Reverend's daughter?" she whispered to Tucker as she handed him a key. "I heard the commotion earlier. Shameful way to treat your own blood." "She needs a safe place, Mrs. Finch," Tucker said quietly. The older woman nodded. "And she'll have it. You're a good man, Tucker Ironside, despite what some folks say." Tucker escorted Zara to a small but clean room on the second floor. A narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand, and a rocking chair by the window were its only furnishings. "Get some rest," he said, lingering at the door. "I'll be in the stables if you need anything." Zara sat heavily on the bed, her son now quiet as he drank the warm milk. Mrs. Finch had provided in a makeshift bottle. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again. "You don't know me." Tucker leaned against the doorframe, his eyes on the small bundle in her arms. "I know what it's like to be alone in the world, Miss Prentiss. Nobody should face that, especially not with a little one." As he turned to leave, Zara called out, "What will happen tomorrow? My father won't take me back, and no one in town will hire me now." Tucker paused, looking back at her. His next words would change both their lives forever. "I've got a small homestead about 2 hours' ride from here. It ain't much, but there's a cabin, some livestock. I've been working cattle drives to save up enough to make it proper. You and your boy could have a roof over your heads, and I could use the help." He hesitated, then added softly, "Folks talk, though. They'd assume things." Zara stared at him, this stranger offering salvation. "They already think the worst of me," she whispered. Tucker nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Get some sleep. Think about it. Either way, I'll help you get wherever you want to go tomorrow." After he left, Zara bathed her son and herself with the warm water Mrs. Finch had provided, then laid William in a drawer padded with blankets. As she watched him sleep, she considered Tucker's offer, a homestead, far from the judgmental eyes of Redemption Creek. It sounded like a dream, but also terrifying. She knew nothing of this man except his kindness tonight. But what choice did she have? Morning came too quickly, the pale light filtering through the curtains as Zara nursed William. A soft knock at the door announced Mrs. Finch with a tray of breakfast hot biscuits, bacon, and strong coffee. "Tucker's downstairs," the older woman said as she set down the tray. "Said to tell you he's arranged for a wagon to take you wherever you decide." She hesitated, then added, "I've known that boy since he rode into town 3 years ago. He works hard, keeps to himself mostly. But he's honest, despite what happened at the saloon last night." Her eyes twinkled. "Old Sawyer's been cheating folks for years. Tucker just caught him at it." Zara thanked her for the information and the breakfast, feeling slightly more at ease. After eating and dressing in her one clean dress, she gathered her meager belongings and went downstairs, William sleeping against her shoulder. Tucker stood as she entered the small dining room, removing his hat. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly, tall and lean, with shoulders broadened by hard work. His face was tanned and weathered, but his eyes were kind beneath the brim of his hat. "Morning," he said quietly. "Sleep all right?" "Better than I expected to," Zara admitted. "Thank you for the room." Tucker nodded, then cleared his throat. "I've got a wagon outside. Mrs. Finch packed some supplies for you and the little one. Have you decided where you want to go?" Zara took a deep breath. "Your homestead, if the offer still stands." Relief flashed across Tucker's face. "It does." They left Redemption Creek as the town was waking up. Zara felt eyes on them as the wagon rumbled past the general store, past the church where her father would now be preparing his Sunday sermon. She didn't look back. The journey to Tucker's homestead took them through rolling grasslands, the spring wildflowers painting the prairie in splashes of color. Tucker spoke little, but when he did, his voice was gentle, pointing out landmarks or checking that she and William were comfortable. "It's not much," he warned as they crested a rise and his land came into view. "Been working on it when I can between drives." The cabin sat nestled against a copse of cottonwoods beside a small creek. Beyond it, a corral held several horses, and a few cattle grazed on the hillside. A vegetable garden, recently planted, stretched beside the cabin, and a chicken coop stood nearby. "It's beautiful," Zara said honestly, feeling hope rise in her chest for the first time in months. Tucker's cabin was indeed simple one main room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table and chairs, and a curtained-off sleeping area. Everything was neat and clean, if sparse. "I'll build on another room," Tucker said, suddenly seeming nervous as he watched her take in his home. "For you and the boy, and a proper bed. I've been meaning to anyway. For now, you can take the bed, and I'll bunk by the fire." Zara set William down on a blanket near the fireplace. "I can't take your bed, Mr. Ironside." "Tucker," he corrected. "And yes, you can. It's settled." He began bringing in her few belongings and the supplies Mrs. Finch had sent. I'll get a fire going, then show you around." As the days passed, they settled into an uneasy routine. Tucker worked from dawn to dusk, tending his small herd, breaking new ground for more crops, and beginning construction on the promised addition to the cabin. Zara took over the cooking, cleaning, and care of the chickens and garden. In the evenings, they shared quiet meals, Tucker always careful to maintain a respectful distance. One night, 2 weeks after their arrival, Tucker returned from checking the cattle to find Zara sitting on the porch, William sleeping in her arms. She'd been crying. "What's wrong?" he asked, settling beside her but not too close. "Nothing," she said, wiping her eyes. "It's silly. Tell me anyway." Zara looked out at the sunset, painting the prairie in golds and pinks. "I was just thinking about how kind you've been, taking us in, working yourself to exhaustion, building that addition." She swallowed. "My own father threw me out like trash, but you, a stranger, showed more compassion." Tucker was quiet for a moment. "Your father's a fool," he finally said, his voice tight with anger. "Any man worth his salt would stand by his family." "William's father didn't," Zara admitted softly. "Thomas promised to marry me when he returned from California. I believed him. By the time I realized he wasn't coming back, it was too late." Tucker's hands clenched on his knees. "Then he's a fool too." Zara shifted William to her other arm, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I worry about my son growing up without a father, the way people will treat him." Tucker looked at the sleeping infant, then at Zara. His next words came slowly, as if he was considering each one carefully. "The boy needs a father, someone to teach him to ride, to hunt, to be a man." He met her eyes. "I ain't much, Zara. I don't have book learning or fine manners, but I know how to work hard, and I know right from wrong." Zara's breath caught. "What are you saying, Tucker?" He took off his hat, twisting it in his hands. "I'm saying, if you're willing, if you'd consider it, I'd like to be his father. Legally, I mean. I know we haven't." He flushed. "What I'm trying to say is, I respect you too much to assume anything, but folks already think we're together. And William deserves a name, a family." "Are you proposing marriage?" Zara whispered, shock evident in her voice. Tucker met her gaze directly. "I am. Not very well, I reckon, but yes, it wouldn't have to be. We could keep things as they are, if that's what you want. Separate. But William would have my name, and you both would have my protection. Always." Tears filled Zara's eyes again. "You barely know me." Tucker smiled, that dimple appearing in his cheek. "I know enough. I know you're strong and kind, and you love your son something fierce. I know you can cook a venison stew that makes a man think of heaven. And I know that in these past 2 weeks, coming home to you and William has made this place feel like more than just land and lumber. It's felt like a home." Zara looked down at her sleeping son, then back at the honest face of the man beside her. She'd come to admire Tucker's quiet strength, his unwavering reliability. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was respect and gratitude, and something else she couldn't quite name. "Yes," she said finally. "I'll marry you, Tucker Ironside, for William's sake, and because I believe you're a good man." Relief and something like joy crossed Tucker's face. "I'll do right by you both, Zara." "That's a promise." They were married 3 days later by a traveling preacher who stopped at their homestead. The ceremony was simple, just the two of them, William and the preacher's wife, as witness. But as Tucker slid a simple gold band onto her finger, he'd ridden all the way to town and back in one day to get it. Zara felt a flutter of something more than gratitude in her heart. That night, Tucker insisted on keeping to their arrangement, he by the fire, she in the bed behind the curtain. "Nothing has to change," he assured her, "not until you want it to." Summer flowed into autumn, and the three of them settled into family life. Tucker finished the addition to the cabin, creating a proper bedroom for Zara and William while he took the original space for himself. The harvest was good, the cattle fat, and Tucker spoke of building a proper barn before winter set in. Zara found herself watching her husband, for that's what he legally was as he worked, the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt as he chopped wood. His gentleness with William, who at 6 months old would crow with delight whenever Tucker entered a room. The quiet conversations they would have in the evenings as they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. One crisp October evening, Tucker returned from town with supplies and a letter. "It's for you," he said, handing her the envelope. "From Redemption Creek." Zara's hands trembled as she recognized her mother's handwriting. She hadn't heard from her family since the day her father had thrown her out. Opening it with trembling fingers, she read the brief message. "Your father forbids contact. But I need to know you're safe. Mrs. Finch told me where you are. Are you well? Is the baby well? Please write. Mother." Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks. She wants to know if we're all right. Tucker sat beside her at the table. "Will you write back?" Zara nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yes, I'll tell her about William, about the homestead." She hesitated. "About you." Tucker looked down at his hands, work roughened and strong. "What will you tell her?" Zara reached out impulsively and covered his hand with hers. It was the first time she had intentionally touched him, outside of the accidental brushes that came from sharing a small space. "I'll tell her that William has the best father any child could hope for, that you're kind and honorable, and that we're building a good life here." Tucker's eyes, when they met hers, were filled with an emotion she was beginning to recognize in herself as well. "Is that true, Zara? Are you content here? With me?" Zara squeezed his hand. "More than content. I'm grateful every day for what you've done for us, Tucker. You've given us a home, security. You've asked for nothing in return." Tucker turned his hand beneath hers, so their palms met. "I didn't marry you for what you could give me, Zara. I married you because I wanted to give you and William everything I could." "You've given us so much," she whispered, suddenly very aware of the warmth of his hand against hers, the closeness of his body at the table. Tucker's voice dropped lower, intimate in the lamplight. "There are times when I wonder if maybe someday you might think of this as more than an arrangement." Zara felt her heart quicken. "I already do," she admitted. "I have for a while now." Tucker's eyes widened slightly. "You have?" Zara nodded, summoning her courage. "I watch you with William, how patient you are when you're teaching him things, how your face lights up when he laughs. And I watch you working the land, caring for our home, for us." She took a breath. "And I find myself thinking that I'm the luckiest woman alive to have found you." Tucker stood slowly, drawing her up with him, their hands still joined. "Zara," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I've been falling in love with you since that first night in Redemption Creek, when you stood in the street with your baby, looking like the bravest person I'd ever seen." Zara's free hand went to his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "I love you, Tucker, not just for what you've done for us, but for who you are." When his lips met hers, gentle and questioning at first, then with growing certainty, Zara knew she'd found her true home. That night, for the first time, they truly became husband and wife, their bodies learning each other with tenderness and growing passion. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in what was now their bed, Tucker ran his fingers through her hair, his expression one of wonder. "I never thought I'd have this," he confessed. "A family, someone to love." Zara pressed a kiss to his chest, over his heart. "Tell me about your life before. You've never spoken much about it." Tucker was quiet for a moment, his hand still stroking her hair. "Not much to tell that's pleasant. My pa died in the war when I was 10, Confederate side. My ma tried to keep our small farm going in Tennessee. But it was too much. She remarried a man who had no use for another man's son. When I was 16, I left, drifted west, worked cattle drives, tried my hand at mining, but I always wanted land of my own." He pulled her closer. "Saved every penny I could, and 2 years ago, I bought this place. Been working to make it thrive ever since." "And now?" Zara asked softly. Tucker smiled, kissing her forehead. "Now, I have everything I ever wanted, right here in my arms." Winter came, bringing with it heavy snows that isolated their homestead. But within their snug cabin, the small family grew closer. William took his first steps, toddling across the floor to Tucker's outstretched arms. Zara discovered she was pregnant again, the news bringing tears of joy to Tucker's eyes as he lifted her in his arms, spinning her around their kitchen. "Careful," she laughed. "I'm delicate now, remember? "You're the strongest woman I've ever known," he countered, setting her gently on her feet. "But I'll be gentle anyway." Spring brought new calves, freshly turned earth in the garden, and a letter from Zara's mother announcing she would visit with or without her husband's blessing. She arrived on a bright May morning, stepping down from the wagon Tucker had sent to meet her at the nearest town. Margaret Prentiss was a small woman with Zara's same honey-colored hair, now streaked with silver. She froze at the sight of her daughter standing on the porch, William on her hip, her pregnancy now visible beneath her apron. "Zara," she breathed, and then they were in each other's arms, both crying. Tucker stood back, giving the women their moment before approaching with William. "Mrs. Prentiss," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Tucker Ironside. Your grandson has been excited to meet his grandmother." Margaret took Tucker's hand, studying him intently. "Thank you," she said simply, "for loving my daughter when we failed her." Tucker shook his head. "Loving Zara and William is the easiest thing I've ever done, madam." During her week-long visit, Margaret saw the life her daughter had built. The thriving homestead, the obvious love between Zara and Tucker, the happy, healthy child who adored his father. "Your father is wrong," she told Zara on her last evening as they sat on the porch, watching Tucker teaching William to feed a motherless calf from a bottle. "I knew it when he cast you out, and I know it even more now. You found happiness, real happiness." "I have," Zara agreed, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Tucker is everything a husband and father should be." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I'll never forgive myself for not standing up to your father that day, for not going with you." Zara took her mother's hand. "You're here now, and you'll always be welcome here." "I'll come when the baby is born," Margaret promised. "Your father be damned." In late summer, their daughter Emma was born, with Tucker pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door as the midwife from the neighboring homestead helped Zara through a difficult labor. When the cry of a newborn finally pierced the air, Tucker burst in, his face awash with relief at the sight of Zara, exhausted but smiling, holding their tiny daughter. "She's perfect," he whispered, sitting carefully beside them on the bed. "Just like her mama." As promised, Margaret returned for Emma's birth, this time bringing Zara's younger sister Jane, who had defied their father to come. Their presence was a balm to Zara's soul, helping to heal the wounds of rejection that still occasionally ached. The years passed, and the Ironside homestead prospered. Tucker's hard work and business sense turned their small operation into a successful ranch. 2 more children joined their family: Daniel, born on a snowy winter night, and Rebecca, who arrived on a warm spring morning. William, though not Tucker's by blood, was his father's shadow, learning the ways of the land, growing into a responsible young man with his mother's kindness and his father's strength. Tucker formally adopted him on his 10th birthday, though as far as either of them was concerned, they had been father and son from the beginning. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their now expanded home, watching their children play in the yard, Zara leaned her head against Tucker's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that night in Redemption Creek? How different things might have been if you hadn't been thrown out of that saloon at the exact moment I was passing by?" Tucker wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "I think about it often. It was the luckiest moment of my life, even if my pride took a bruising." He chuckled. "I wasn't cheating, you know. Never told you that. Sawyer just didn't like losing to a nobody cowboy." Zara smiled, turning her face up to his. "You were never a nobody, Tucker Ironside. You were always the man who saved us, who loved us when no one else would." Tucker kissed her softly. "You saved me too, Zara. You and our children gave me the family I never thought I'd have." In the yard, William, now 15 and tall like his adoptive father, was showing 5-year-old Rebecca how to throw a lasso. 8-year-old Emma and 7-year-old Daniel were racing each other to the big oak tree and back. Their laughter floated on the evening air, a testament to the life Tucker and Zara had built together. "I love you, Mrs. Ironside," Tucker murmured against her hair. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." Zara nestled closer to him, her heart full of contentment. "And I love you, Mr. Ironside, forever and always." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant golds and pinks, Zara reflected on the long journey from that desperate night when she'd been cast out with nowhere to go. The path had been difficult at times, but it had led her here, to this man, to these children, to this life filled with love and purpose, and she wouldn't change a single step of it. 10 years later, the Ironside Ranch had become one of the most prosperous in the territory. Tucker's innovative ranching methods and Zara's careful management of their finances had allowed them to expand their holdings and build a beautiful 2-story home to replace the original cabin, though Tucker had insisted on preserving that first small structure as a reminder of their beginnings. William, now 25, had returned from agricultural college in the East with new ideas and a young wife named Catherine, a doctor's daughter who had fallen in love with both William and the western landscape. They lived in their own home on the ranch property, expecting their first child that spring. Emma, at 18, had her mother's beauty and her father's determination. She taught at the small school that had been established for the children of neighboring ranches and homesteads, riding her mare back and forth each day with a book always tucked in her saddlebag. Daniel, 17, worked alongside his father and brother on the ranch, his quiet competence making him seem older than his years. And Rebecca, 15, was the family musician, her piano playing bringing joy to their home and the community gatherings they hosted. Zara, now in her 40s, still turned heads with her graceful beauty, those silver threads now mingled with the honey of her hair. Tucker, his face weathered by years of sun and wind, remained strong and vital, his blue eyes still lighting up whenever Zara entered a room. On the 20th anniversary of the night they had met, Tucker surprised Zara by taking her back to Redemption Creek. The town had changed, grown larger, more prosperous, but the church still stood at the end of the main street, though a new preacher now delivered the Sunday sermons. Zara's father had died 5 years earlier, unreconciled with his daughter despite Margaret's efforts. Zara had attended the funeral, standing at the back of the church with Tucker's supportive arm around her shoulders, but the closure she had hoped for remained elusive. Now, as they walked the streets of her former home, Zara felt the weight of old memories pressing on her. Tucker sensed her discomfort and took her hand. "We don't have to stay if it's too difficult." Zara squeezed his fingers. "No, I'm glad we came. It's important to remember where we began." They visited the boarding house, now run by Mrs. Finch's daughter, who remembered Zara and Tucker from her childhood. "Mother always said yours was the most romantic story she'd ever witnessed firsthand," she told them as she served them tea in the parlor. A handsome cowboy rescuing a mother and child in their darkest hour. Tucker grinned, that familiar dimple appearing in his cheek. "I recall it somewhat differently. I was the one getting thrown out of a saloon, hardly a knight in shining armor." "You were to me," Zara said softly. "You still are." That evening, they checked into the town's new hotel, a far cry from the rough boarding house of 20 years ago. In their comfortable room, Tucker pulled Zara into his arms, his expression growing serious. "I've been thinking about something, Zara. Something important." Zara looked up at him, her heart still quickening at his touch even after all these years. "What is it?" Tucker led her to sit on the edge of the bed, taking both her hands in his. "William came to me last week. He wants to take Catherine east after the baby is born, to visit her family." Zara nodded. "That seems reasonable. I'm sure Catherine misses them." "There's more," Tucker continued. "He asked if I'd consider making him a full partner in the ranch. Said he wants to put down permanent roots, make sure his children grow up on Ironside land." Zara's eyes widened. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd discuss it with you, but I think it's a fine idea." "The boy," Tucker chuckled. "The man, I should say, has earned it. He works as hard as I do, has good ideas." And it got me thinking about the future, about what we've built together. His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I want to make provisions for all our children, Zara. A fair division of what we've created, so they'll never have to worry." Zara reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the familiar lines. "I agree. But why does this make you so serious? This seems like something to celebrate." Tucker turned his head to kiss her palm. "Because it made me realize how blessed I've been. 20 years ago, I was a lonely cowboy with a small piece of land and big dreams. And then you and William came into my life, and everything changed. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond myself. His voice grew husky with emotion. "I've spent 20 years trying to be worthy of the trust you placed in me that night." Tears filled Zara's eyes. "Oh, Tucker, you've been more than worthy. You've been everything a husband and father could be." Tucker gathered her close, his strong arms encircling her. "I love you, Zara Ironside, more now than the day I married you, which I wouldn't have thought possible." As they held each other in the growing darkness, Zara thought about the journey they had traveled together, from strangers thrown together by circumstance to partners bound by love. They had built a life rich with family, purpose, and deep affection. The next morning, before they headed back to the ranch, Tucker insisted on one more stop. He led Zara to the small cemetery on the edge of town, to a simple headstone marked Reverend Joseph Prentiss. Zara stared at her father's grave, emotions warring within her. "I don't know what to feel," she admitted. "He never accepted William, never acknowledged our marriage or our other children." Tucker stood beside her, solid and supportive. "You don't have to forgive him, Zara, but I thought you might want a moment here to say whatever needs saying." Zara knelt beside the grave, touching the cold stone briefly. "I wish you could have seen the life we built, Father. I wish you could have known your grandchildren, especially William. He's a good man, educated, respected." She paused, then continued more softly. "I wish you could have known Tucker, seen the kind of husband and father he is. Maybe then you would have understood that true righteousness isn't about judgment, but about love." She stood, wiping a single tear from her cheek. "I'm ready to go home now." Tucker helped her into their wagon, and as they left Redemption Creek behind, Zara felt a sense of peace settle over her. The past could not be changed, but it had led her to the present, to this man beside her, to their children and grandchild to be, to a life filled with love and purpose. That night, as they lay in their bed at the ranch, Tucker pulled Zara close. "Any regrets about our trip?" Zara shook her head, nestling against his chest where she had found comfort for 20 years. "No regrets. It reminded me of how far we've come, how much we've overcome together." Tucker's fingers traced lazy patterns on her arm. "There's something I've wondered about over the years, but never asked." "What's that?" "That night when I offered you a place here, offered to be William's father. Did you think I was crazy? A stranger proposing such an arrangement?" Zara smiled in the darkness. "Not crazy. Miraculous. Perhaps. I was desperate, terrified for William's future. You appeared like an answer to prayers I hadn't even been able to form." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "What about you? What possessed you to take in a preacher's daughter and her illegitimate child?" Tucker was quiet for a moment, his hand coming up to brush her hair back from her face. "I told myself it was the right thing to do, that no decent man could leave a woman and baby with nowhere to go." He smiled ruefully. "But the truth? The moment I saw you standing in that street, holding your baby, and still managing to look both terrified and defiant, something in my heart recognized you, like I'd been waiting for you without knowing it." Zara leaned down to kiss him. A kiss that still held the sweetness of their first, but was deepened by decades of shared lives, shared sorrows and joys. "I'm glad you were thrown out of that saloon," she murmured against his lips. Tucker laughed, rolling her beneath him. "So am I, Mrs. Ironside. So am I." As spring turned to summer, the ranch bustled with activity. William and Catherine welcomed their son, James Tucker Ironside, named for both grandfathers. The baby's arrival seemed to signal a new beginning for the family, a continuation of the legacy Tucker and Zara had begun. One warm evening, as the family gathered on the wide porch of the main house for supper, Tucker looked around at the faces he loved, Zara, their children, William's wife, and new baby, and felt a fullness in his heart that sometimes still amazed him. The lonely cowboy who had once believed family wasn't in his future had been given this, a dynasty of sorts, built on love and hard work. "I have an announcement," he said, standing at the head of the table. All eyes turned to him, expectantly. "As you know, William has become a full partner in the ranch operations." He nodded to his oldest son, who sat proudly with his arm around Catherine. "Today, I filed papers in town, making it official that Ironside Ranch will pass equally to all 4 of our children upon my death, though I plan to stick around for a good long while yet. He winked at Zara. Murmurs of surprise and gratitude rippled around the table. In their time, it was still common for the oldest son to inherit the bulk of a family's property, especially land. Each of you has contributed to this ranch in your own way, Tucker continued, and each of you deserves a share in what we've built. Your mother and I want you to know that this land, this home, will always belong to all of you equally. Daniel, usually so quiet, spoke up. But Pa, what if some of us don't want a ranch? Emma loves teaching, and Rebecca talks about studying music back east someday. Tucker nodded. That's a fair question, son. Any of you can sell your share to the others if you choose a different path, or keep it and share in the profits while pursuing your own dreams. The point is, you'll have choices. And support, Zara added, her eyes moving lovingly over each of their children. Whatever you choose to do with your lives. Later, as they prepared for bed, Zara wrapped her arms around Tucker from behind as he stood at their bedroom window, looking out at the moon-silvered land. That was a wonderful gift you gave the children tonight, she said, pressing her cheek against his back. Tucker turned in her embrace. It wasn't just my gift to give. We built this together, Zara. Everything we have, the ranch, our family, our life, it's all been a partnership from the beginning. Zara smiled up at him, love shining in her eyes. A partnership that began with the kindness of a stranger on a desperate night. And became the greatest blessing of my life, Tucker finished, lowering his head to kiss her. Even after all these years, the touch of her lips still kindled a fire in him, a desire that had only deepened with time and intimacy. As the years continued to pass, the Ironside family flourished. Emma eventually married the new doctor in the growing town nearby, combining her teaching with helping in his practice. Daniel took to ranching with the same quiet dedication as his father, eventually bringing home a bride of his own, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Rebecca did go east to study music, returning 3 years later with both a formal education and a husband who had given up a promising law career to follow her west, establishing the first proper law office in the county. William and Catherine had 3 more children after James, their growing family becoming the center of activity at the ranch. Catherine's medical knowledge, learned from her father, made her the unofficial healer for the ranch hands and family alike, until Emma's husband established his practice. Through it all, Tucker and Zara remained the heart of the family, their love story becoming something of a legend in the region. How a disgraced preacher's daughter and a solitary cowboy had built one of the most successful ranches in the territory, raising 4 children and creating a legacy of love and prosperity. On their 30th anniversary, their children surprised them with a celebration that brought together neighbors, friends, and extended family from near and far. Margaret Prentiss, now in her 80s, traveled from Redemption Creek, where she still lived in the family home, having long since made her peace with her late husband's stubbornness. I always knew you two were meant for each other, she told them, as she sat in the place of honor beside Zara at the long table set up in the ranch yard. From the moment Tucker came to tell me you were safe, I saw the way he spoke of you like you were precious beyond words. Tucker, overhearing, grinned. She still is. As the celebration continued around them, Tucker drew Zara away for a moment of privacy, leading her to the old cabin they had preserved all these years. Inside, he had placed a vase of wildflowers on the table, much like the ones that had been blooming when they first arrived at the homestead. 30 years, he said, taking her hands in his. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that you walked into my life. And other times it feels like we've always been together, Zara replied, her eyes crinkling with her smile. Tucker nodded. That's it exactly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I have something for you. Inside was a ring set with sapphires that matched his eyes, surrounded by small diamonds. Tucker, Zara breathed, it's beautiful. Not as beautiful as you, he said, taking the ring and sliding it onto her finger beside her wedding band. I promised you a proper ring someday, remember? When I could afford more than that simple gold band. Zara looked up at him, her eyes shining. I've never needed anything more than what you've given me, Tucker. Your love, your faith in me, the family we've created together. Tucker drew her into his arms. Do you remember what I told you that night on the porch before I proposed? When you were worried about William growing up without a father. Zara nodded. You said the boy needs a father, someone to teach him to ride, to hunt, to be a man. And he got that, Tucker said, his voice thick with emotion. But what I didn't say then, what I hardly dared to hope, was how much I needed both of you, how empty this place was before you came, how lonely my life had been. Oh, Tucker, Zara whispered, reaching up to frame his face with her hands. We needed each other, all of us. As the sounds of their family's celebration drifted through the open door of the cabin, Tucker bent to kiss his wife, the woman who had transformed his life from the moment he saw her standing alone and afraid in the street of Redemption Creek, a chance encounter that had become the greatest blessing of his life. I love you, Zara Ironside, he murmured against her lips. Today, tomorrow, always. And I love you, Tucker Ironside, she replied. My cowboy, my husband, my heart. Outside, the sun began to set over Ironside Ranch, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors that had welcomed them home on their first day together. But now, instead of an uncertain future stretching before them, they had a rich past of shared memories and a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. A legacy built on a single act of kindness that had grown into a lifetime of love. Together, they walked back to join their family, hand in hand, as they had been for 30 years, their love story still unfolding with each passing day. A preacher's daughter cast out for bearing a child alone, and the cowboy who had said, "Then let me be his father." Two people who had found in each other not just salvation in a moment of need, but a love strong enough to build a lifetime upon. And in the end, that was the true heart of their story, not the hardships overcome or the success achieved, but the love that had made it all possible. A love that had started with compassion and grown into something so powerful, it had not only changed their lives, but created a ripple effect of goodness that would continue for generations to come. As Tucker and Zara rejoined the celebration, surrounded by the family they had created together, they exchanged a look that said more than words ever could, a look of profound gratitude for the journey they had shared, and the promise of many more years to come. Their story, like the land they had nurtured, had taken root and flourished beyond anything they could have imagined on that fateful night when destiny brought them together. A preacher's daughter with nowhere to turn, and a cowboy with a heart big enough to embrace not just her, but the child she carried as well. And in that embrace, they had found home.